My name is Stephen Downey, and you are very welcome to episode 43 of the Mindful Living Guide. This week we have a fantastic guest who will be talking about the menstrual cycle, but from a mindfulness point of view. Our guest this week, Paula Byrne, is the creator of the Mindful Cycle program, and she's passionate about mixing her education within menstrual cycle with mindfulness, and I think it's a fantastic combination, and it's something that's really going to help people in schools going forward. She's a fantastically interesting person, and I'm really happy to get her on the podcast, and I think you'll get a lot from it. I definitely did as a dad. Paul has a wealth of knowledge that I think can really help a lot of people, and I'm just really excited for you to sit back and enjoy this week's episode of the Mindful Living Guide. You're so welcome to this episode of the Mindful Living Guide. This week, I have a really great guest I'm really excited to chat to. Her name is Paula Byrne. She's a holistic wellness educator and the founder of the Mindful Cycle. Paula is passionate about self-care, holistic wellness, and the importance of living in sync with the menstrual cycle because she has lived experience of the positive benefits this sustainable lifestyle has. Paula, you're so welcome to the Mindful Living Guide.
Thanks so much for having me on, Stephen. It's a pleasure to be here.
And as I said, we kind of touched base there. It was late last year when I was taking a break from the show, and I was so happy that when I got in contact again a few months later, that you were still willing to talk to me and have a chat and about mindfulness, because I just think, as I was just saying, that there's such an overlap in so many people's journeys and about how they discovered mindfulness for themselves. And I think were you doing a course with teacher or something like that, and that got you into mindfulness originally?
Yeah, so originally I attended a wellness and self-care course for teachers, and at the time was a primary school teacher myself. That's what my background is in, and I just knew that I needed something and I didn't know what the something was. So I attended that course with Anne-Marie Ireland, who is now a dear friend of mine. And that was probably around, gosh, 12 years ago, 13 years ago. And yeah, that was the beginning of my mindfulness journey.
Brilliant. And it's brought you full circle to now, as I mentioned before, you're the creator of the Mindful Cycle. And in case anybody's not familiar with it, it's about educating people about their menstrual cycle.
Yeah, it is. So like, gosh, to just explain a little bit, I was diagnosed with endometriosis in my mid-20s, and that's like a menstrual related condition. And for me, it manifested as like really painful periods and other symptoms throughout the month. And it was, and still is, because there's no cure. It's something that I've been living with, and it's something that we're not educated about. People with cycles, it's the information about what's happening in your own body isn't readily available. And I realized that, in my own experience teaching, we weren't teaching about menstrual cycles. And it's not just important for people with the cycle, it's also important for partners, brothers, dads, people who don't have cycles, to understand what happens throughout the month. So during the pandemic, like a lot of people, I had, huge space and time to reflect on my own life and my own career and where I wanted to go. And I came across a course by a lady called Lisa De Jong that was a professional training in menstrual cycle coaching and facilitation. And I thought, God, this looks so interesting because, in my 30s, I still didn't understand what was happening in my body every month properly. So it was for personal reasons that I decided to take up that course. And I realized how helpful it was for me to have all this information about what was happening in my body each month and to be able to adjust my life throughout the month accordingly, to manage my energy with the ebb and flow of my cycle. And I was like, whoa, this is literally the embodiment of mindfulness. And I just thought, how wonderful if we could give young people, young women and girls, access to this tool, which is like it's an approach to your life. It's a sustainable skill that you'll have for your entire life if you learn how to live in sync with your cycle and understand properly what's happening in your body each month.
And it's so
So
important. It's so important because it's like in mindfulness we talk about bringing awareness
yeah,
to our thoughts, but also you have to bring awareness to your body and what is happening within your body at that time. And like I like is it true that when you've had issues with your own cycle since a
yeah,
very young age, and the only kind of thing that help that you got at that time was literally here, take a tablet or take something and or some painkillers, and that's it. And that's my own experience from talking to my wife. That's the kind of experience she would have got from as well.
yeah, that's so true. And at the time I accepted it.
Mhm.
And because, you trust your GP, you just go along with it. And, for my own mom as well, she had had a history of painful periods and painful cycles. So she didn't think that anything was amiss because mine were like how hers had been, and that seems to be the pattern that we just kind of accept however it's been for other females in our family, and we accept what we're told by our GPs because maybe they're not educated either. It's not a specific part of their training, unless they opt for it, I guess. So yeah, and from my research that I've been doing around menstrual cycles and periods, it seems that it's still quite common not to be understood and not to be heard, really.
There's still such a taboo about it. Like even like I've got a teenage daughter and a preteen as well, and there was a lot of talk in the house. It's still very secretive. The girls don't talk
Yeah.
to me about any of this. But my wife obviously talks to me about it
Yeah.
for a long time. And but the preteen had the talk in school, and she's very open. So she was saying about being nervous about this talk. But even that, I was chatting to her there earlier on today, and I said, "Oh, I'm talking to a really interesting girl that teaches people about their menstrual cycle and the periods." And her answer, she just looked at me and she goes, "Toodaloo," and she walked off. She just did not want to
Yeah,
talk about it. But I think it's important though that we can create safe places that girls can talk about this type of thing and have open conversations with people like yourself.
definitely. And the thing is, the talk in school, and it seems to be the same as it was when I was at school, like I'll be 40 this year, and it doesn't seem like that much has changed in many schools. I hear great things happening in some, but a lot of them, it's just a talk about a period that happens, and that means you're not pregnant, and kind of that's it. But like your menstrual cycle is so much more than that. It's four different phases or inner seasons. Um, Alexandra Pope describes them in her book Wild Power as inner seasons, which I just think is so lovely that, and that kind of imagery can resonate with most people. So, like, the time when you've got your period is your inner winter. And if we think of winter, we think of hibernation. And that's how most women might feel, even for a couple of days when they've got their period, and then you move into your inner spring when your hormones and your energy are rising. Inner summer is ovulation, that's the peak of your hormones. And then you go into inner autumn, which is the premenstrual phase where you kind of want to be pulling back from things and slowing down again to get ready for that restful period. Yeah.
Oh, what an interesting way to describe it.
Mm.
If if you had a magic wand and you were able to revamp the educational system the way it is now, what way would you like to change it for preteens in schools?
So that's exactly what I'm working on with the mindful cycle at the moment, Stephen. And I have great support from Social Entrepreneurs Ireland to kind of scaffold me through the process, which is brilliant. I'm really grateful to them for that. And it's to have it as like a more holistic and a body literacy program where, in from my point of view, the mindful cycle, the reason I've called it that is because I'm teaching it through the lenses of awareness, acceptance, and compassion. So it's an awareness of what is actually happening with the hormones and what a typical cycle should look like. And then it's an acceptance of what does your cycle look like and how to understand what your own cycle looks like, and having compassion for yourself during those 4 phases and implementing self-care during those 4 phases, because society and culture have us thinking that we have to be exactly the same every day. And if we're not, well, then, it's not good enough, or it's not productive, or that's not successful.
Just brush it all under a carpet and life goes
Yeah.
on. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's what I did for years, and it's only recently that I've kind of uncovered all of that. And I was listening to your last podcast with was it Endo Doherty?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and like when he was describing enduring walking with the washing machine and stuff like that. And I endured my cycle. I endured my period, and I just pushed through, and I berated myself for, well, why can't you deal with your period? And, why is it so painful for you and so difficult? Because people just didn't understand, and neither did I. But now I have that awareness and I have that compassion, and, it's made such a difference to my life.
I think you've hit the nail on the head about a lot of people, like whether it's your cycle or
Yeah,
it's your or mental health, that people can be so hard on
yeah,
ourselves when we feel we're different.
yeah.
I've a family member who has discovered they have autism, and they're dealing with the fact that they're different, and that um, it's trying to kind of bring that compassion into it, to embrace that difference. And I know that, like, I'm sometimes I've often seen like I'm very different to a lot of people around me, and to look at situations in different ways. And for years I thought, Jesus, why am I as outgoing in certain situations, or why am I this? And it took a long time to realize that my differences and are a superpower in some ways, and that we need to bring that compassion into our lives in many different ways. And so I love the way you're bringing mindfulness into this journey for people.
That's so interesting because, unless we can accept things as they are, we can't start to try and make changes.
Yeah.
And, you know, being critical of yourself, I always think back to this, of the times when I was so harsh on myself.
Mm-hmm.
And was I able to change anything then? No, because you're all the time in this battle, and you're adding more suffering to whatever the situation is. So whenever we're going through something tough or something that's a bit difficult, bringing in the compassion, and like it's not that easy. Like, you do have to practice it. And even now, accepting things as they are, and bringing the awareness and bringing the compassion, it's a practice. It's something that you're doing all the time, but it really does make a difference.
And it's amazing. We can bring it into many parts of our life. I know with like
Hmm.
you love the idea of holistic living, and I think nature be very important in your life as well. Would it?
Absolutely. Like I try to make sure that I get outside every day, get the fresh air. Like at the moment, myself and my fiance are after putting up a polytunnel because we love growing our own veg.
Brilliant.
And yeah, so really excited now for the spring to start planting that again. And like hiking is something that just, oh, if there was one activity, well, two, but hiking is one of them that like really regulates me, really makes me feel grounded, and
Yeah.
gives me that just a feeling of being free.
Mhm.
There's nothing like being out in nature for you just to realize that you're part of something huge and awesome, and that feeling of freedom.
Many times we're in autopilot from day to day, and
Yeah.
we're just going from job to job, from whatever our daily practice kind of endures, and we forget about the vastness of the world and what we actually see. And I think I have a big love for hill walking as well, and
Yeah.
hiking, and it's just when you step back and you actually see some of the scenery. We're so lucky in Ireland that we have some
Oh,
amazing places, and just see the vastness of it. Like it really kind of it helps to ground you as well in nature.
totally. And you're so less inclined to reach for the phone or technology or anything like that when you're out there because there's so much to see. Yeah.
It's amazing to you. But I often ask when people come on, especially someone in an expert kind of field, for any tips or anything they can help. And I think from a personal point of view, as a parent, and especially because a lot of a massive following of women on the podcast, but I also have men as well. And as a parent of girls, and like, is there tips that you would give parents for for helping with people that are discovering their cycle for the first time as well?
Yeah, definitely. Like the first thing I would say, Stephen, is to, make it as normal, as anything else that happens on the daily basis, because that's what it is. It's such a normal part of life. And it's a celebration of a healthy body. When somebody starts their cycle, it's a celebration that their body is working as it should be. And how fab is that? That as women, girls, we have this thing that happens every month that only happens to us. And it can be so powerful if we understand it and we're not afraid of it, because I think a lot of times what causes the fear is the unknown and not knowing what to expect. So, I know that there's girls as young as 8 and 9 getting their first period now. And if that happens out of the blue and they're not prepared, it would be a scary thing to happen. So having that chat about this normal, natural thing that will happen to you as your body is preparing for you growing up. It doesn't mean you're a grown up just because you have your period. And I think sometimes that can be a scary concept as well, for a young girl who gets her cycle and she's like, what do you mean I'm a young woman? That can be a little bit scary. So that it's your body is preparing for when you're a grown up and it's natural and normal. And just knowing that, it can take a couple of years for a cycle to regulate. So that parents shouldn't panic if it's not regular, within a few months. And also, there might be a little bit of mild cramping and some symptoms, but cramps that interfere with the normal daily routine, killer cramps and severe period pain, that's a sign that perhaps something needs to be investigated. No, just because something is common doesn't mean that it's the norm,
Mm-hmm.
I guess.
It's your body's way of telling you just to get something checked out as well.
Totally. It's like any pain that we get, it's just a sign from your body. It's a little message,
Mm.
and if we don't listen to the messages, they get louder.
Yeah, absolutely. And so what's next for the mindful cycle? I think you were saying that you're preparing to try and get into schools now, or what's
Yeah, so I'm heading into my first school on the 21st of February. So I'm delighted to be in Sculcrease here in Portlaoise, which is really local to me, for 3 days with their transition years. I'm really excited about that.
brilliant?
I'm heading to the Pres in Kilkenny as well after that. And I have some openings in April and May as well, and June for primary schools. But I just can't wait to meet the girls and have these conversations.
It seems like you're literally at the start of a fantastic journey. I can see the buzz inside you that you really know that this is really going to make a difference to people as well.
Absolutely. And that's why I'm doing it. If it can just help one person understand what's happening, then I will be absolutely thrilled.
Uh, I'm really am delighted for you, and I have to actually I have to talk to you about one thing I ask on every single episode, and I want to make sure I do it today because you have such an interest in mindfulness. I ask all my guests a question purely because I love the way different people interpret mindfulness for themselves, and you've been practicing for a very long time, and I always find that after a while we find what works for ourselves, and that we can't prescribe, say, oh, this type of mindfulness is what you should be doing, or that we all have different ways. So if I say to you, Paula, like, what does mindful living mean to you? What does it mean in your world?
Mindful living in my world means understanding yourself and your needs, accepting things for what they are, and having compassion for yourself on a daily basis.
Wow, that is just so powerful, and I think I love the fact that you're bringing compassion into the conversation all along, because it's one side of mindfulness that a lot of people don't talk too much about. I did the mindfulness based stress reduction um, many years ago, and it was my first introduction to mindfulness. And it's an introduction that a lot of people have, and a lot of it people talk about the stressful side. And I did go. I was in a very high pressure job, and I was suffering a lot from stress, and that's what brought me to mindfulness. But along that journey, I think the most powerful part of mindfulness was the compassionate side. And like we learn to bring compassion to others, but it's so hard to bring compassion to ourselves.
Yeah.
Um, if I could ask for like a tip of just for people who are struggle with self care, with looking after themselves, so like, is there any tips that you would give for people to bring self compassion into their life?
Oh, that's a
Sorry,
tough one. Like,
I'm just gonna spring in that one on you. Sorry, but
yeah. Um, Bringing self-compassion into your life, like, it is probably the hardest one, I would say, as well, Stephen. And, you know, if you're struggling with that, kind of think of, you know, when we say things to ourselves and when we're treating ourselves, would I say this to my dear best friend? You know, so if you're saying things to yourself that are harsh and critical and negative and, won't serve you, just reflect on that. Take a moment and think, would I say this to my friend? And if you wouldn't say it to your friend, it's not serving you to say that to yourself or to do that action. So that would be my biggest one, is, because that's, to me, that's what self-compassion feels like: treating yourself like a dear friend.
I love that. It's so important that, I mean, it's amazing though. We find it so easy to be compassionate and loving to our
Mm.
friends and to other people, and it's just turned that on its axis. Listen, Paul, I've really enjoyed chatting to you on the podcast today and learning more about the mindful cycle. And so, if people want to get in touch, because I'm sure there will be a lot of people that actually will maybe want to bring this into their own kids' school as well.
Yeah.
And what's the best way for people to get in touch with you?
So you can find me on Instagram at Apple Blossom Holistic. You can reach me there, or you can find me at appleblossom.holistic@gmail.com, or appleblossom.holistic.ie is the website. And I do actually have 2 workshops coming up, if I can give
Fantastic.
myself
Yeah.
a plug,
Yeah.
Stephen.
Oh, yeah.
I have a mindful cycle for individuals on the 25th of February. That's on Zoom.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And there's one for parents as well on the 25th of March on Zoom too. And that's like, it's a morning session again, just about, talking to your
I,
kids about
I'm writing
cycles.
this date down for myself.
Brilliant. That's
Um,
great.
it's
Yeah.
I think
So,
it's so important. Like, it's because, like, I know as a dad, I obviously would find it very awkward to chat to my girls about
yeah.
it, and it's just about, I think, um, giving someone the ability to create that space where they could have that conversation, and if they wanted to, you know.
Yeah, for
Um,
sure. Because, like, I mean, you're, for want of a better word, you're armed then with info, and you don't kind of feel like, oh God, I don't know what I'm saying here. You
yeah,
have an idea of what's going on.
that's it. You're saying, "Will we just go to McDonald's?"
Not a bad shout.
Oh yeah, the awkward conversation. But listen, Paul, I've really enjoyed it. I've learned a lot, and I know that a lot of people listening will have learned a lot from this conversation, but will also be intrigued to get in contact with you more. So I will make sure that all those contact details will be on our show notes when we release this
Brilliant.
episode, and can get in contact with you. But listen, thank you so much for what you were doing, because as a dad, I can see the absolute benefit of what you're doing, and I know it's really going to make a difference. So listen, the best of luck, and thank you so much for coming on the Mindful Living Guide.
Thank you so much, Stephen. Those words mean so much to me. So thanks a million.
So there you have this week's episode of the Mindful Living Guide. I really hope you got something from this episode. I know I definitely did, and some great advice for me as a parent. And I just know that the program that Paul is building will really help parents going forward. Thank you again for taking the time out of your day to listen to the podcast. And I really, really hope that you've gotten something from this episode. There's many episodes in the back catalogue, so look them up. We're on Instagram, Spotify, and all major podcasting platforms. If you are on Instagram, please look me up. It's Mindful Living Guide, or my personal account is Stephen Downey, and I'd love to connect. Take care of yourself, and you've been listening to the Mindful Living Guide.